Good evening. Welcome back to the Santa Monica City Council meeting for Tuesday, April 28th. Your council has been in closed session for the last couple of hours. And normally after we come out of closed session, it is the city attorney who reports on what we've done. Well, we don't have a city attorney right now, as Lane Dillon is now our interim city manager. We had an acting city attorney, but rather than have him announce this, I'm very happy to announce that our acting city attorney, George Cardona, has been approved to become our interim city attorney. And that means we've authorized our negotiators to draw up a contract with George for those services. We've had quite a discussion in closed session that is not complete at this time. So we decided, rather than keep you waiting, we're going to do something unusual, which is postpone the rest of our closed session until after the open meeting. We'll go back into closed session later tonight and then eventually report back out on the other items that we do decide. But we knew there was so much community interest, we didn't want to stay in closed session and make you wait any longer. So we are back here. It is 7:45. We missed the timing of about 15 minutes. It was the best we could do. And we are ready for the clerk to call item number 2.
Item number 2 is the city manager report, economic recovery, and we have no public comment to submit.
So we'll turn to the interim city manager and hear that report.
I believe the deputy city manager will be taking the lead on this report.
Okay.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I believe you can hear me.
We can.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the Santa Monica community. My name is Anuj Gupta, and I'm the Deputy City Manager. I'm going to bring up my screen here. All right. So I'm pleased to represent a team of staff across several city departments in presenting an overview of our city's Economic Recovery Task Force, which is our all-hands-on-deck effort to get Santa Monica's economy, businesses, and workforce moving again as quickly as possible. So I want to begin with a brief overview of the why, although I think we all are unfortunately well aware. We have all seen the economic devastation from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic all around us. We are living through it in our own city and in our own lives, as communities around the country and around the world are. A few data points to illustrate this. Of course, beginning with the sudden and massive increase in unemployment, as the chart on the right indicates. We have seen 3.2 million unemployment insurance claims filed in the state of California alone over the last 5 weeks, and over 26 million filed nationwide over that same period. We have, of course, seen virtually every business in our city impacted by this crisis significantly, with particularly acute impacts on our retail, accommodations, restaurant and food service businesses, and recreation and entertainment businesses. 16 of our city's 41 hotels and motels are now closed for the time being. And of our 9,800 businesses in the city, among the hardest hit are our 600 retail, 500 accommodation and food services, and 700 arts, entertainment, recreation businesses. According to our survey data, a total of 255 essential services businesses are currently operating with very limited operations in many cases, including restaurants on average at about 10% of their typical operations. So what this work is really about is getting our businesses open and helping them be set up for success. The businesses that are at the heart of what has made Santa Monica such an attractive and vibrant place to live, work, visit, and play. Getting our community members back to work, and of course restoring the revenues that support our top priority city services. At a time like this, we are mindful of the risk that this effort will become all things to all people and attempt to fulfill every need at this time of such great need. So accordingly, we have decided it to be very important to focus our efforts strategically on 5 key priority areas, as you see on this slide. First is business retention and reopening, helping businesses reopen quickly and more flexibly, and supporting their marketing and other needs via existing partnerships, including by local travel and tourism, the Chamber of Commerce. Second is business processes, including permitting and costs, focusing on reducing the costs, obstacles, and sources of delay to open and reopen businesses in Santa Monica. Third is community economic development, focused on supporting local hire and reemployment opportunities with targeted efforts to support our particularly vulnerable communities and those with special needs in our community. Fourth is a communications and marketing effort, which will send the message to our community, the region, and eventually the world that we welcome you back to Santa Monica, that you can return and be safe and thrive here, participate in our vibrant economy, and invest in all of the wonderful things that we have to offer as a community. And fifth is federal and state resources, leveraging technical assistance for local businesses and ensuring and facilitating access to loans, grants, and stimulus programs coming from other levels of government. Now, we are amid an unusual and unprecedented crisis, so this recovery will require an unprecedented response. The process that we intend to undertake in this work will not be our typical Santa Monica process, our very worthy typical Santa Monica process of many rounds of meetings to ideate, deliberate, discuss, and consider every angle of the actions that we take with every possible stakeholder. Engagement, of course, remains vital, everything that we do, but the urgency of this crisis demands a different approach that minimizes delay and enables us to move quickly and decisively using every tool that we can. So at the fastest end of the spectrum, as illustrated on this slide, we will be taking some actions via executive orders when appropriate to set forth emergency rules and regulations, as well as implementing administrative changes when possible. We will rapidly be bringing a steady stream of actions back to this council in the form of code changes, process threshold adjustments, revisions to fees, and other policy items, again, all designed to support and enable business reopening and business success. And we will also proceed with some longer-term assessments of city policies and regulatory practices that affect how we can best support our businesses and our workers. And many of those will be the subject of our more traditional community engagement processes. Now, in all of this work, we will absolutely lean on the expertise, input, and ideas of the vast array of business and community partners that we are fortunate to have here in Santa Monica to make sure that we are vetting and advancing the very best ideas to get us moving forward on a broad and inclusive economic recovery. The logos that you see on the screen represent just a sampling from travel and tourism, all of our bids downtown Santa Monica, the Chamber of Commerce, of course, our Santa Monica College and Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District, to some outside partners like the Milken Institute and LAEDC. We will, through this effort, have regular and structured collaboration among city staff, our business and institutional partners, as well as community members in each of the 5 focus areas that we outlined. Now, there's a lot to this slide, of course, but really what we're sharing here with the council and the community mainly is to underscore that we have already put a great deal of thought into how we organize, structure, and sequence this work, from our city staff teams across all 5 areas to the leads of this effort on staff, including myself and your directors of planning, community development, and housing economic development, and all of our business and community partners. What we're doing is putting in place a structure that will ensure that we solicit expertise, that we quickly vet ideas and translate the various proposals into concrete actions for implementation, whether through council action, executive orders, or administrative adjustments at the staff level, and that we move quickly, quickly and decisively to advance our economic recovery. Finally, looking ahead to what's next. Next Tuesday, at our next council meeting on May 5th, staff will be bringing forward the organizational restructuring recommendations to the council. one of the three pillars around which this reorganization is based, alongside foundational services for a safe and clean Santa Monica and emergency response, is indeed economic recovery. At the following council meeting on May 12th, our Planning and Community Development Department will be bringing forward 2 interim zoning ordinances, one focused on the promenade and one citywide, which will contain a number of adjustments to zoning regulations that have previously created impediments to businesses opening or expanding, including alcohol limitations for restaurants, outdoor dining, food halls, parking, and resource recovery and recycling. At future council meetings, economic recovery will essentially become a standing agenda item, and we will endeavor to bring back actions at virtually every council meeting, including developing a schedule for council consideration, pending major projects. And I just want to conclude by noting that a guiding principle of our work will be that we are seeking an economic recovery for all in our community. The strategy that we build and the tactics that we deploy will of course, be about supporting all kinds of businesses in our city, big businesses and small businesses, tech and retail and hospitality, mom and pop and larger chain businesses. But our work will also focus on ensuring pathways to success for all community members, especially those with the greatest need and vulnerabilities, and those who have too often been left behind from the prosperity that Santa Monica is known for, and those who have been facing challenges since long before anyone had ever heard of the coronavirus. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have at this time, and I just want to note that I am also joined by my colleagues Andy Agel and David Martin if there are questions specific to their work.
Deputy City Manager Gupta, before we go to the council members with questions, and I see Councilmember Morena already in the queue, could you go back to the slide that showed the community partners? Possible to show that again?
Sure. Give me a moment to just reshare my screen, Mayor. Is this the one you're referring to?
And I have to lean in a bit to see it. Yeah, let me just check my first.
There are a lot of logos there, and I did just want to note, as I mentioned, that this is definitely not an exhaustive list of partners or set of logos. We just it's meant to be illustrative.
I guess that's part of my question. I see on that the logo for a local advocacy and political group that does endorsements, but I don't see the logo there for another much longer standing advocacy and political group in town, Santa Monicans for Measures Rights. I do see Santa Monica Forward. I don't see Santa Monicans for Measures Rights. Why is that?
Yes, Mayor, I again, this is not intended to be an exhaustive list. We have received some formal letters of input from several of the groups represented here, but absolutely, the group that you referenced, as well as many others who are a part of our community whose logos and names are not reflected on this list, are intended to be a part of this effort. It is intended to be a very inclusive tent, as the slide indicates. While we are determined to move quickly and decisively, we want to make sure that all ideas and all stakeholders have the opportunity to contribute their input, and so we absolutely will proceed with that spirit in mind. And apologies for any omission there.
Councilmember Morena, you are the first in line with a question.
Great. Thank you for putting that together. I know you guys have been hard at work. I just wanted to clarify a few things. So if you could put the slide up with the process.
The very busy slide, right?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Here.
Yeah, that's the one. Perfect. Okay. And so I just wanted to get some clarity around the business community and the 2 times monthly, and what does that mean, and who's included, and is that group formalized, and how do you see that working from now kind of through the process?
Absolutely, Councilmember. So what we are envisioning is that, as I indicated previously, we have 5 staff teams organized around the 5 focus areas. What we have done, and we had an initial partners kickoff call last week, which was extremely well attended. Over 50 folks were on that teleconference, and we invited those partners to sign up for one or potentially more of the 5 focus areas to be a part of and to contribute their expertise and ideas to. We are kicking off each of those 5 groups' work over the next week with initial meetings led by city staff, but including the partners and community members and business leaders who have volunteered for those efforts to ensure that their input, their ideas, many of which have been already brought to the surface and submitted to us as staff and floated to the community, are included. And what we're going to focus those initial meetings in each of those 5 areas on is prioritizing through an exercise combining, again, the staff and the community and business experts to prioritize the actions in each area so that we can then, again, quickly vet the proposals, the mechanisms for action in those areas, and begin a steady stream of bringing them back to you as the council as appropriate or taking other action warranted. But the idea is that the business and community partners will be regularly meeting with the staff teams, conveying input, ideas, expertise, for the staff to vet, digest, and then make decisions to act upon based on the input of those partners. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, in part. Just a couple follow-ups. So is that group a formalized group, or is it more individuals that have coalesced and that are submitting individual ideas, which then you are cataloging and prioritizing?
Sorry, I may have lost audio for a moment.
That's all right. What I was asking is that group a formalized group, or is it just a number of individuals that are constantly feeding ideas into a city pot, which is then organized?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're organizing it around the 5 pillars or focus areas. Each of the 5 areas and I can bring up that slide with the 5 areas again, the multicolored slide, if that's helpful. But each of those will have a team of city staff who will be carrying forward the work and working in partnership with the members of our community, our business partners who have raised their hand to be a part of that particular effort. So let me get back to, this is the slide with the 5, we've deliberately illustrated them as intersecting and overlapping because we really see them as very interrelated efforts. But the organization will really be focused around the 5 areas to channel the input on a regular basis in the specific substantive areas.
Got it. So in that one area, and this is my next question, when you were talking about workforce development, which lane does that live in?
The community economic development lane, primarily.
Got it. Okay, cool. And then within that career development, or call it workforce development, do we also have career development and the connections between SMMUSD and SMC?
Yes, so we do. We did have both the school district and the college on our partners call, and we absolutely expect to be working in close partnership with them going forward in this work.
Awesome. Thank you. Great job.
Councilmember Hara, you're next with a question. And we'll need to have your mic on. I'm having difficulty hearing Councilmember Hara. Is anybody else? Councilmember Hara, do you want to try again?
Nope, not yet. Sorry.
Gotcha now.
We can hear you now.
Yes,
Okay, I think that my system here is going a little haywire, but no, I think that was an accidental mic, so I'm okay. Thank you so much, Councilmember Morena, for your questions. I think I'm satisfied now. Thank you.
Councilmember Himmelbridge has a question.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Anuj. If somebody would want to be involved with this committee, how would one of us go about proposing them, or how would they propose themselves?
So we already have had a number of community members, both individuals as well as representing institutions or organizations, reach out to us as staff. They have reached out to me individually. Our primary point of contact for our partners call coming out of it was Jennifer Taylor, our economic development manager. And so either through reaching out to the city manager's office and myself, or to Jennifer Taylor, I think would be the appropriate way to get plugged in.
And with respect to the 5 working groups, you have 3 council members on this committee, and I assume that they'll be working with some of the working groups. But if he wanted, I tried to sign up for one, for instance, and was blocked out. If we wanted to be on one of the working groups, is that a possibility without being on the main committee
or
task force?
Councilmember, to my understanding, I think we had gone back and forth on the question of a council committee or subcommittee, and I don't believe at this time that we've recommended the creation of one. I may invite the city manager or city attorney to weigh in on that, but part of the intent on bringing very regular items and having essentially a standing agenda item on this is to ensure a very regular council connection and source for input on all of this work. But I may toss it over to either Lane or George.
That's correct, Councilmember. There is not currently a council subcommittee that is associated with this effort. You could direct us to come back and recommend such a subcommittee, but at this time we do not have a council subcommittee. Should you wish to be involved in one of the lanes of work, we could work with the city attorney to understand a proper way to do that consistent with the Brown Act, to make sure that you are providing input without reaching decisions outside of a public meeting. So you would have to be separated into different workflows, and we would have to be very careful about the Brown Act. We certainly can do that work if there's an interest from more than 3 of you to be involved in this effort.
So when you say more than 3 involved in the effort, do you mean 3 people on the task force? Because what I'm really talking about is attending some of these subgroup meetings and hearing what people have to say to educate ourselves, right? And could we do that?
So you can attend in a listening capacity, and I can't see the city attorney, but certainly if he wishes to jump in. But generally, under the Brown Act, you could attend in a listening capacity as long as you are not engaging, as long as we don't have multiple of you engaging in the process in a way that could be interpreted as you reaching a decision outside of a meeting. So if you want to attend and listen, that unless the city attorney corrects me, that should not be a problem.
And we should
that is correct.
And we should coordinate, because I assume we aren't going to have, unless you're going to be publicizing each of the subgroup meetings in a general way, we would need to know about when those meetings were scheduled, correct?
Correct.
And how would we find, well, so is the process to first indicate an interest in a subgroup and then get the times, or would that be the way to go about it?
That is the process that we are carrying forward with all of the members, for example, who members of our community and partner organizations who attended our kickoff meeting last week. We have sent follow-up emails to those folks, inviting them to sign up on a spreadsheet, and then those who have raised their hand for a particular focus area will be receiving the invitations to those meetings. And so, similarly, of course, we'd be happy to do the same for the members of the council who have a specific interest.
Thank you.
We have businesses closed. We have workers who don't have jobs. We have families who can't pay their bills. So I hope will understand that this is a process that needs to go forward quickly, and we don't want to burden it too much with Brown Act requirements. In other words, I'm not saying we want to violate the Brown Act. We want to avoid situations where we make it more difficult for action to be taken quickly, because this is a situation where actions need to be taken if we're going to help the people who need the help. Councilmember Moreno, you are next.
Thanks, Mayor. Just one more comment, question, and I think it's crystallizing the question I was asking before. So we have the 5 areas of strategic focus, but the city or there's a part that's missing in this process, I think, in that who puts it all together, organizes, quantifies, and prioritizes within the recommendations coming from those 5 groups? What's the overarching view of those 5 lanes?
So, Councilmember, the design of this is that those process, the decision-making process will be staff-driven and staff-led. So each of the 5 focus areas will have a staff lead comprised of the individuals who I referenced earlier, several of whom I referenced earlier, who are leading the overall effort. The chairs, if you will, of the effort, including myself, are Andy Eagle, our Housing and Economic Development Director, David Martin, our Planning and Community Development Director, David Carr, our Assistant City Treasurer, and Peter James from Public Works, as well as Jennifer Taylor, our Economic Development Manager, are also key members of that team. So we will be guiding and directing the work of a much broader city staff team that will be kind of populating each of those 5 focus area teams. And the ideas will come up through their engagement with our partners, through research, obviously, of what other cities are doing. We know that we don't have certainly a monopoly on the best ideas in Santa Monica. We have a lot of good ones, but that will be a key part of this as well. And then the decision making ultimately will be driven by the individuals leading this effort, of course, in concert with the city manager and city attorney, in kind of the mechanisms for implementation of the different ideas that rise to the surface and the action items that rise to the surface. The other thing I will mention is that, because again, as we referenced, we really are organizing virtually all of the city's work and the city's structure, as you'll hear more next week, around these 3 pillars, one of which is economic recovery. We are bringing in some existing key work efforts into the economic recovery umbrella. And so, as I mentioned, at the May 12th regular council meeting, the interim zoning ordinances, which are really the product of ongoing work efforts that had predated this pandemic and this crisis, including some of the Promenade 3.0 work that the council has heard before, is being really sort of folded in and broadened, given the crisis of the moment, to give businesses citywide some of those same tools, some of that same flexibility to rapidly reopen and be in a position to succeed. I think we will be, as part of this umbrella as well, scheduling council consideration of the pending major projects. As again, to the point that this is really an umbrella that represents a very key and critical part of what we will be doing as an entire organization going forward.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I think where I'm trying to drill down into is that a lot of these items, or at least a few of them, were the same thing that this council voted on in December for our economic community development plan. So I think we're all on the right track. And one of the challenges that we have found in creating that plan and in discussing it on the dais when we did was the silo effect. And I love the fact that we have different department heads leading all 5 of these components, but the creativity in making sure that all of these departments are crossing over constantly, and what that looks like from the private side, and what innovations you can bring in from the outside looking in. So I just want to emphasize that point. I think you've done it in the slide where you have the 5 areas of strategic focus, and then they all convene in a single point. That point at which they convene is critically important, and that the council and the private sector are looking at that single point, and that we're all agreeing to the priorities at that moment, because the perspectives are different. And I think that's where it's important that we break down those silos, work together, and maybe have, a head of each, both business and or commercial, private, and city folk and council members at that point, determining the best, most efficient path.
And we'll characterize that question, if we may, because this was questions from the council. At this point, there's no action before us, and I think in lieu of discussion, our questions have indicated some specific interest the council has. Before we move on, Interim City Manager Dilg, you've asked to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Moreno, I wanted to speak briefly to some of the thoughts behind your questions and let you know we do consider this a citywide effort. As you know, we are aligning the organization to meet three priorities: emergency response, economic recovery, and foundational services. As we do that, the leads of this effort do cross departments. And I will be very attentive to making sure that we are bringing together all of the work efforts. The other place where this does convene is with you. And so one of the reasons that we're not currently recommending a subcommittee is that we have eyes on all of you as the elected, as your deputy city mentioned, an item every, hopefully every council meeting. With the exception of May 5th. But following that, we will start May 12th, and we start tonight by bringing you an item for discussion at every council meeting. We additionally will be placing things into buckets of work that allow us to move quickly. So some things will move by emergency order, some things will move by quick actions to you, others will take more community process and more involvement. And we recognize that. So we are working very hard to prioritize, to align, and to continue to move things forward. I also hear you saying that you want to see vision, as you often do. We will continue to focus on what is the vision overall. That's something that we are very much in communication with community partners on, and we will look to you to help us establish that vision. So we hear you on bringing this together and coming forward with a plan for the future that makes sense, and not just spending our time developing that plan, but moving that plan forward even as it is in development. We will, as they say, be building this airplane while we are flying it. We will be moving in short-term strategies and long-term strategies at the same time, and looking to all of you to help us to do that in a way that is coherent and sets us forward on the right path.
So for the council's role, there will be lots of room for opportunity and for accountability. As we move forward with this, we'll be hearing a lot more about it. It was a report tonight, so that concludes item 2 on our city council agenda. Before we move on to the consent calendar, council staff has requested that we withdraw item 3G from tonight's agenda. That was the Public Housing Authority plan. That would require a procedural vote, which we can do by voice if somebody would make a motion.
Motion. Remove.
Multiple motions, impossible to determine. I'll take it as Councilmember Moreno. And is there a second?
Second.
This is tough. I can tell the male voices from the female. That's about it. I'm going to give it to Councilmember Himmelrich. So we have a motion by Councilmember Moreno, a second by Councilmember Himmelrich. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? So by unanimous vote, the council has approved the staff request that item 3G be pulled from tonight's agenda. My understanding is it will come back to us on a later agenda. And with that, could the city clerk please call what remains of the consent calendar?
The consent calendar, all items will be considered and approved in one motion unless removed by a council member for discussion. And you have one public comment that the assistant city clerk will read to the record.
So we'll open the public hearing and we'll hear that comment.
This comment is from Denise Barton. Good evening. Regarding Lane Dilg's appointment to the city manager's office, I have to ask, besides Kevin McCune's nice words about her having to do with the coronavirus emergency, what qualifies her to be city manager? Because she didn't apply for the city manager position, ever. She applied for the city attorney's position since that is the position she is qualified for. And as a city attorney, did she already qualify for the city's executive pay plan? Or would this be your way of rewarding Lane Dilg for all her work behind the scenes regarding the district voting case? To prolong the appeal case by doing such things as submitting documents to the court with too many words, which she has done at least twice. But the specialty of her law degree is corruption. So obviously she knows how to do it, be corrupt as well as you do. As well as in your 12th Amendment to the coronavirus emergency, don't you allow emergency workers to take gifts such as lodging? Yet in your order, emergency workers are not the only ones specified to be allowed to accept gifts. So how many gifts have you or you're planning, or how many gifts have you or are you planning to accept for your votes? Please remember, we've been here before. Remember how much you were paid by the developers for the Bergamot Station votes, which the residents had to do a referendum to stop, which would bring us back to Lane Dilg's law specialty being corruption. Might your actions be putting her as a city manager because the city is being looked at for corruption and you think she'll be able to protect you? Again, making Santa Monica look more and more like the city of Bell all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Always good to hear from you. That'll close the public hearing on our consent calendar and bring the consent calendar without item 3G in front of the council. Are there any items that council members would like to put in the consent calendar?
I'd like to pull 3J.
I believe that was Councilmember Morena asking to pull 3J. Are there any other items that council members would like to pull? Don't see any.
I'd like to pull item 3C, please. Councilmember.
Do people use the chat so I know who's speaking? Was that Councilmember Hara?
Hara, yes.
Yes.
You wish to pull again?
3C.
3C. So now we have 2 items pulled from the consent calendar. Are there any more? I don't see any, so would someone like to make a move for the consent calendar without C, and was it J?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Move the consent calendar without C and J.
That was Councilmember Morena making a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Councilmember Hara.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Morena, a second by Councilmember Hara, and if the clerk would please call a roll call vote.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day?
Yes.
Councilmember Hara?
Yes.
Councilmember Winter?
Yeah.
Councilmember Davis? Is that a yes?
From Councilmember Davis.
Okay, we can't hear you, but I can see you saying yes. Councilmember Himmelrich?
Yes.
Councilmember Morena?
Yes.
And Mayor McKeown?
Yes, and I guess that's the first time we've technically taken a vote by a video indication of a thumbs up. For the record, I hope you can get your microphone back on at some point tonight, Councilmember Davis. We're not able to hear you right now. But I will take that to have been a unanimous vote by the council, 7-0, in favor of those portions of the consent calendar that had not been either removed ahead of time or pulled by council members. So now, if we could, we'll go alphabetical and go to item 3C, if the clerk would call that.
Okay, item 3C, award request for proposal and enter into agreement with Conduit State and Local Solutions, Inc. for parking permits and citation services.
Councilmember Hara, I think it was you who pulled that one.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if you could just give me a little bit more information about this. What is the purpose of having this agency? Are they going to keep the record of the citations that we give? I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what the purpose was. So if you could just, you don't have to give me an entire presentation, but if you can just at least clarify a little bit, because that seems like quite a bit of money that we're going to be providing to this agency.
We have a staff response to that question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is Henry Servine, your parking manager. Thank you to the council member for the question. what we're suggesting tonight is award of a package of services to the presumed apparent responsive and most capable firm, Conduit Citation Services and State and Local Solutions. Councilmember, to your question, we're having them provide a myriad of the services, including the facilitation of the software that produces the parking tickets generated by police department, then the management of the citations, including the programs that include compassionate payment of parking tickets that are accumulated by some individuals that don't have the ability to pay them off. So we do that as well. They also help administrate our call center, and they handle calls received to help process the residential permit program annually. They also help us with the annual onboard and recent production of annual beach passes and the annual senior beach passes. So that's a successful program that we're very proud about, working with the current and, if you will, successive bidder Conduit. The myriad of services, I'm happy to provide more detail, but that touches upon what this package includes.
Okay, thank you so very much. So I have a little follow-up. So who is doing that right now?
The current provider is the same, Conduit State and Local Solutions. They partner with my parking staff. They also facilitate the call center. They also facilitate for those folks that live elsewhere but receive their parking tickets here. They can pay at the West Los Angeles Parking Facilitation Facility that takes payment from us, for Beverly Hills, for West Hollywood, for City of Los Angeles as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that information. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Before we go any further, I do see in the chat list a request from Councilmember Davis to speak, and I'm curious to see if she can.
Yeah, I just wanted to test it because I logged off and logged back on to see rebooting works. Yay.
Just for the record, Councilmember Davis, could you affirm your yes vote on the consent calendar?
Happy to do so. Davis votes yes.
Okay, just not sure that a thumbs up counts. It counted in Rome and the Colosseum, but I'm not sure about here. So we have had a question answered on item 3C, but nobody has made a motion to approve it.
Go ahead and move the motion forward.
Second.
We can't hear you, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
Mayor, you're muted.
Nope, we still can't hear you. Hold on, let me see if I can unmute you now.
There you
Okay,
go.
Where is it? Shows on.
there,
Can you still not hear me?
we can hear
Now
you
we
now.
can hear you.
Oh, good. I thought I'd caught Lyme disease. Maybe very contagious, I don't know. We have a motion from Councilmember Hara, seconded by Councilmember Winter. Is that correct?
Morena.
Morena and Winter on item 3D. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
Councilmember Hemmerich,
Yes.
Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter, Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
and Mayor McKeown.
Yes. Item 3C is approved unanimously by the City Council on a 7-0 vote. The other item pulled was item 3J. Could you call that, please?
Item 3J is approval of first modification to agreement number 10946 DCS with Yellow Jacket Drilling Services, LLC, for the construction of 2 exploratory wells.
Councilmember Morena, you pulled it.
Yeah. So I have a question about the CIP behind this. I know that we've been scraping the bottom of the barrel in general, evaluating all of our improvement projects, and I believe this has to do with the SWIP project. And so I'm wondering what the plans are for the SWIP in 2021 and how this connects with that project.
staff person who can reply.
Thank you, Councilmember. I believe we have Sunny Wang or Susan Klein on the line.
This is Sunny Wang, Water Resources Manager. I could take that question. For some reason, my video doesn't work, so I apologize for that. So it'll be only on audio. Councilmember Morena, I believe your question was regarding the relation of this project with SWIP. Part of the contract is to drill one new production well as well as drill one new injection well. The injection well is related to the SWIP for the purified water to ultimately to be injected into this groundwater aquifer for groundwater recharge and for us to maintain our sustainable yield. So it's linked up with SWIP. As far as the progress of SWIP, I'm sure the project has broken ground in late January, early February, and that project is ongoing since it did receive a low interest loan from the state to fund that project. So that project is still continuing to move forward.
Okay. And will continue to move forward through the next fiscal year. Is that the intention with the state dollars?
Correct.
Got it. And so then the dollars that were asked to approve tonight for the drilling then supports the supply of the SWIP project?
Correct. Part of it, as well as to maintain production in our Olympic well field as well, to continue to extract groundwater from that well field.
Okay. All right. I understand. That's satisfying. Thank you very much. I'll move the item.
You're welcome.
I'll second. Moved by Councilmember Morena, seconded by Mayor McKeown. I see no further requests to speak on the item. If the clerk would call the roll, please.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter,
Yeah.
Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Himmelrich,
Yes.
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
and Mayor McKeown.
Yes. So item 3J is approved unanimously, 7-0 by the council. That completes the consent calendar, except for item 3G, which was pulled at request of staff and ordered on by the council, and will come back at a later date. So we now get to move on to ordinances.
Next, we have adoption and second reading of an ordinance amending Article 8 of the Santa Monica Municipal Code to adopt local amendments to the 2019 California Green Building Standards Code related to electric vehicle parking requirements for newly constructed buildings. And this is a second reading.
I move 7A.
Second.
Second.
I think we had a motion by Councilmember Himmelrich with a second by Councilmember Morena. And the others of you can blame the delay on the buffer on the teleconference, I guess, but they got in first. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter, Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Himmelrich,
Yes.
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
and Mayor McKeown.
Yes, so item 7A is passed unanimously by the City Council, 7-0. We'll move on to 7B.
Introduction and first reading of an ordinance and adoption of a resolution to amend Municipal Code Section 8.08.050 to achieve consistency with state law and adopt a local amendment to Administrative Building Code. And you have no public comment.
We do, however, being a first reading, have a staff report from somebody. Who will that be?
I believe it's Ariel.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor, council members, members of the public. I'm confident you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So tonight I'm presenting to you the recommended adoption of an ordinance and a resolution, as the city clerk pointed out, to amend Chapter 8 of the Municipal Code. Basically, the proposal consists of two items. The first being an ordinance amendment to clean up the administrative section of our locally adopted building code in our municipal code, so that it is consistent with the state code with respect to heights of fences that require a building permit. The second item expands upon this municipal code action that's being cleaned up, and it proposes a local amendment to establish reduced heights for when permits are required specifically for concrete or masonry walls. As many of you know, the state amends the building code every 3 years, and every 3 years the city adopts the new building code along with several local amendments. Council may recall that you recently adopted the 2019 building code in November of last year. Well, 2 code cycles ago, which was the 2013 version of the state building code, that version included a provision that changed the minimum height for when fences require a building permit. It increased the height from 6 feet to 7 feet. In other words, per the 2013 code, which is still in effect today, fences that are 7 feet in height or less do not require a building permit. When the city took the 2013 building code to council for adoption, staff inadvertently omitted this particular change, so our local standards still reflect the prior regulation where offenses of 6 feet or less being exempt from needing a building permit. So this 6-foot threshold is clearly more restrictive than the state, and per state law, the city cannot have a more restrictive standard unless we adopt a local amendment with findings related to climatic, geological, or topographical conditions to justify the more restrictive standard. So with that, as I mentioned, the first recommendation before you tonight is to revise Chapter 8 of the Municipal Code to achieve consistency with the state requirement and exempt fences of 7 feet in height or less from requiring a building permit. The second recommendation is to adopt a local amendment as part of this. What we're seeking to do is to carve out a reduced height for when concrete or masonry walls require a building permit, so that concrete or masonry walls of 4 feet in height or less are exempt from requiring a building permit. So in other words, if you're building a concrete or masonry wall that's more than 4 feet in height, you would be required to get a building permit. This amendment is typical of other neighboring municipalities. And the reason for this is because the state building code doesn't differentiate between material types of fences, between wood, iron, concrete, or masonry. And this reduced height for concrete and masonry walls is warranted for safety reasons because of the seismic and geologic hazards present in the region. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Do the council members have any questions on this item? Councilmember Davis, was that a request? No? We don't appear to have any questions. We don't have anybody who wanted to speak. I'll open and close the public hearing, and that'll set us right into discussion, council members.
I'll move 7B.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, but let me clarify with the city attorney, if I may. This is actually a 2-part action. Part of it is a resolution, and part of it is an ordinance. Is there any reason why we can't do them both on the same vote?
No, you can do them both on the same vote. They are related. The resolution is the findings that justify the stricter restriction for the masonry walls.
Okay, then. I'm trying to remember, and I'm sorry I didn't jot it down. Who made the motion?
Sue,
wasn't it? Yes.
Ulrich made the motion, and it was seconded by Councilmember Hara. So made by H, seconded by H. And see no further speak on it. Ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Morena?
Yes.
Councilmember Hemmerich?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Winter? Is that a yes?
How does he make his voice do that?
I'm sorry.
Councilmember
Hara?
that would be Hara with a J, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day?
Yes, that was awesome, Ted.
And Mayor McKim?
Yes, and I have to say I'm an idiot at phonetics. It was made by H and seconded by J. It's the pronunciation that got to me, but, don't feel bad. People have been trying to pronounce McKeown for a long time. It is 7-0. That is passed. Both the resolution and the ordinance in 7B have been adopted by the council on a unanimous vote. And that concludes our ordinances for tonight. This being a regular meeting, that is to say, we're meeting on the usual night at the usual time, even though under very irregular circumstances and with a teleconference, we do have a public input item 14. Will the clerk call that?
Yes, public input. Public comment is permitted only on items not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. State law prohibits the city council from taking any action on items not listed on the agenda, including issues raised under this agenda item. You have no public comment to read. All public comment that we received is online.
Well, we thank you for that public comment, and it is available not only to us but to other members of the public on the city website. In the future, we're going to have better means for the public to participate in these meetings, and we're working very hard to make that happen. But for tonight, we haven't been able to get that together yet, but I'm glad that at least we're able to post stuff for you online where it's shared with us and with the entire community. So at this point, normally I would entertain the idea of, well, I couldn't entertain the idea of going home. We're already home. But I would have entertained the idea of adjourning. But because we were unable to complete the closed session part of our meeting earlier, and we wanted to come back out and do the public part without making people wait all night, we, rather than adjourn at this point, are going to again recess into closed session. So at this point, thank you for being here. I know it's a new experience for us all to be having city council meetings on computers like this, but we're doing the best we can. We hope you're doing well. Please stay well, be safe. And if the clerk would now take us into closed session for most of the people watching here tonight. So I know it may seem kind of odd the way we keep popping up on screen like that, but actually this is the City Council meeting for Santa Monica for April 28th, 2020, and we've returned again from our second recess for closed session, and this time we actually can report out on the remainder of our closed session. And to do that, I'll turn to Interim City Attorney George Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. So items 1A and 1B from the closed session agenda were already reported on when we were back in open session previously. Items 1F and 1G were discussed with no reportable action. On item 1C, we are recommending that Council authorize the city to sign on to an amicus brief being filed by a coalition of cities and counties in these two consolidated Supreme Court cases in support of California's defense of the ACA.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved by Councilmember Davis and seconded by Councilmember Winterer. I see no request to speak, so we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
Councilmember Himmerich,
Yes.
Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter,
Yes.
Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
and Mayor McKeown.
Yes, so that passes unanimously, 7-0.
In connection with item 1D, this involves a lawsuit that was filed by a plaintiff who was struck by a city pickup truck driven by a beach maintenance employee while sleeping on the beach. The city disputes the allegations made in the lawsuit, but to avoid the expense and burden of further litigation, we recommend that the council approve a settlement in the amount of $150,000.
Move approval.
I couldn't tell who that was making a motion.
It was me, Sue.
I'll second.
A motion by Sue Himmelrich and a second, I believe, by Anna Maria Hart. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any further discussion? No, I don't. So roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter,
Yes.
Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Himmerich,
Yes.
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
and Mayor McKeown.
Yes. So again, a 7-0 unanimous vote of the City Council.
On item 1E, it involves a lawsuit filed by a plaintiff who alleges injury to accidents. The first did not involve the city. In the second, the plaintiff alleges that he suffered injuries after being rear-ended by a car driven by a Santa Monica Police Department employee. Again, the city disputes the allegations made in the lawsuit, but to avoid the expense and burden of further litigation, city attorney recommends settlement in the amount of $22,500.
Move settlement.
Second.
At that time, I heard a motion by Councilmember Himmelrich and a very soft second from Councilmember Morena. I don't see any further discussion, so roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
Councilmember Himmerich,
Yes.
Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter,
Yes.
Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
Mayor McKeown.
Yes, unanimous 7-0 vote of the council.
In agenda item 1H, the plaintiff filed a lawsuit alleging injuries from a collision between her motorcycle and a big blue bus. The city again disputes the allegations made in the lawsuit, but to avoid the expense and burden of further litigation, the city attorney recommends settlement in the amount of $225,000.
Move to settle.
Okay, folks, got to speak up a little louder so I can tell who it is.
Okay. Moved the settlement.
Winter is second.
That's been moved by Councilmember Hara and seconded by Councilmember Winterer. And again, no request to discuss, so we'll do a roll call vote.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter,
Yes.
Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Himmerich,
Yes.
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
and Mayor McKeown.
Yes. Nothing of our City Council.
And that concludes the closed session calendar, Mayor.
And Interim City Attorney Cordana, we gave you a very busy night for your first night in the seat. That's because I think we had a lot of lawsuit types of things we had to catch up with for the past few weeks. If you're tuned into us now, I guess tuned in isn't exactly the right word, but if you're watching us right now, this has been a report out of a closed session after a council meeting that we had the public portion of earlier this evening. So at this point, we are done with the closed session, and we are done with the Santa Monica City Council meeting for April 28th, 2020. So at this point, we're going to adjourn for the night. I, again, will remind you, we're not out of this yet, folks. Remember to distance yourself. Be careful out there. Stay well. Good night.